Okay, we're live. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes. I still have things to do here, as you can see. Still kind of dark, but I need coffee. Okay. I need headphones. Where's my headphones? Well, I can't see anything, so how am I supposed to find headphones? And if you were going to turn lights on, what would you do? You would click on this. You would say, turn on the lights. And the lights would turn on. Hey, now we got something going on. Okay, headphones. Isn't that what I was looking for? There they are. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Hello. Okay. Cannot see everything in my list there. All right. Now we got headphones. Now I need to change website notice, and that's probably about it. I think I've remembered to do everything else. I can bang all this around. Yes, there is about a 30-second delay. It's not due to a dump button. It's because YouTube does their own rendering of the video, and it takes them for their re-stream in all of the different formats they provide. It takes time, and so everything's delayed by about 30 to 45 seconds. Okay, let's change the website so it doesn't say today, so that it says, right now. I need some audio in my head. There we go. Now we can hear myself. It's the little things. Okay, let's change this. Where is that? The little toolbar, the Viper bar. Content. Custom text. Let's send people to the live page. My network study group is right now. Click here to join us. Save the custom text. Empty the cache. And all is good. Okay, let's do, I can't see anything. Let's turn this on. I can actually see something. That's better. I can see something. Okay, let's do stuff. What do we got here? We've got me. We've got me again. Getting sick of looking at me. We've got this screen, which really should be this, which really should be this. That looks good. We've got my Socrative screen. And there's me with a little head in the top. So that all works. How about that? Okay. Who said this wasn't going to work? Oh, wait, that was me. It's amazing that it works at all. Same settings for Socrative. The Professor Messer is the room on Socrative.com. And I'll show that during the presentation itself. Let's connect the iPad up so that it is on the same network as my laptop. It is currently not. Put it on my corporate machine. Now it's on the same network as my laptop. I can start Keynote here. And it will Is it going to find it? There it is. And it will play the presentation. So there's my remote control. All right. It's not really coffee. I'm not going to tell you what I put in there. Single malt. All right. We don't need the Viper bar anymore. We don't need, probably get my studio going on the call-in lines. You're already holding, but there's no show yet. Not for another 5 minutes. And I'm not taking calls until the second hour. So you're really going to be waiting.
Your show is scheduled.
I hope you're not calling in with the 800 number.
9 seconds.
In fact, I really should just have it so it doesn't, can I have it so it doesn't take calls? What would this do? No, that's calling out. Well, okay. Well, it's connected in the second hour. We will be taking calls. Until then, that's just how it goes. So, gosh, is that it? I kind of had to rush things today. I was not doing well with all the things. Let's go ahead and start recording here. You know, I need to start recording on my backup system. Here. I see me. Record me. Capture. Right there. Capture. Keep everything that was there. How much room I got? This is great. That's a great backup system that I got. Very inexpensive. We can talk about that later.
4 minutes.
Not really network related. But it's a great way to back things up. Okay. So that's running over on a box that's down here, which you can't see. Let's turn off beeping noises. Turn this off. Yes, it should say waiting on teacher activity because I'm not doing anything yet. What else do I need here? I need something. Am I ready for this? What a day. The camera is looking a little off. The color, the white balance on this camera is not right at all. My office is not this brown. It's the way it looks on my Sky. It's a little bit better on my other. The monitor I have up top is not as good as the monitor actually color-wise that I have in front of me. The color on that one's actually pretty good, so it's not too bad. Professor Messer is not case sensitive. It's all lowercase on Socrative is the way I put it in. The room name for me, but I don't know if it's case sensitive at all, but it's all lowercase because I'm, you know, that way. What am I missing? Oh, I know. Something for my throat. Didn't take anything. Well, we'll see how well that goes. Is that it? Have I got all my ducks in a row? I think I do. Probably not. There's always that one thing, right? Recording. That's important. Stream is up. Apparently the audio works. Didn't actually do an audio check. I guess we could do that.
Until showtime.
Let's see if it makes any noise whatsoever. Let's see if it's really live. Am I really live? Ducks in a row? I think I do. Okay. So it all works. We're already piling into this Socrative there. Okay. Okay, had to look and figure out what that was. I didn't catch the reference. We have to go back, figure all those things out. I'm fine with that. I did finish the gaming build. Well, the first one. I'm going to do another one. What, a minute? I guess I have to plan to, do the stuff here. That's going to go here. This is going to go here. Okay. So you don't see me, but you're about to in a moment, I think. Is there something? No, I thought there was something on the wall. There's actually something on my monitor. That's better. Okay. Sorry, no buffering problems here. I'm getting great stats here, so it's all you, my friend. Sorry about that. And is it going to do anything? Oh, we're very close. We're about to start. Here we go.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds.
See?
4,
she knows.
3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2014 Network Plus Study Group live from the headquarters of Messer Studios in Tallahassee, Florida. My name is James Messer, and I'll be your host for the next hour and then some as we go through some of the questions you've sent me during the month, and we'll talk about all things networking. I want to appreciate you, send my appreciation to you for joining us today. There's a lot to go through in a very short period of time, but I wouldn't be able to do this without your support throughout the month, for visiting the website, for watching the videos. There's so much going on the Messer Studios right now. I wish I could tell you. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of things you don't even see here on the other side of the camera, but over the next few months or so, there's quite a bit we're working on. So hopefully that is something that will slowly be able to trickle out and tell you about. And we wouldn't be able to do these things without your support. We also want to thank the folks who have purchased our downloadable and offline version of our Network Plus course. And if you want to see more about that, you can see it at professormesser.com/download-network plus. If you'd like to follow what we're doing, you can follow us on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter. And perhaps even more important, if you wanted to contribute in some way to the site, you could always subscribe to our YouTube channel. That if there was one thing you had to choose from and you didn't want to buy anything or you didn't have money to contribute, that's absolutely fine. But joining or subscribing to the YouTube channel goes an amazingly long way. And I want to appreciate everyone who's done that so far. I think we're up to 77,000 subscribers. Trying to get over that 100,000 mark so that we get some nice things from Google. We'll see if that really happens. I'm changing up the format a little bit this month. If you're watching this live on YouTube right now, there is a live chat for this that you could find at the Professor Messer website. At the bottom of every page on the Professor Messer website is a chat. It's there 24/7, whether I'm streaming or not. There's always somebody in there. I'm usually lurking around there somewhere. There's a chat also that I opened up just for this live Network Plus study group chat, and you can follow along with what we're doing there. So if you happen to be watching this on a different website and you're trying to figure out how is he communicating and how is he getting information, that's where I'm getting it from. There is also some live interactions that I like to do during the study group. In the entire first hour of this study group is going to be all about questions and answers. I'm going to be asking you some pop quiz questions and you're going to be answering them. So I've got a bunch of questions lined up. So this will be fun. But to participate, you need to go to the Socrative website. Go to socrative.com, SOCRATIVE.com, and it will ask you for a room name. You can either put your name in or just put any name in when it asks you for a name, and you can put in room name Professor Messer. And you just click on that student login link and use the room name Professor Messer. There's also an app for Socrative. So if you don't want to pop open a separate window and you'd like to do this in an app that just is going to give you one question after the other, you don't even have to change web pages anymore. This is so great. You can download that on Google Play, the iTunes App Store, or even a Windows app. These Socrative folks have thought of everything. And it's kind of nice to have this capability available so we can do those things. I'm going to start this right now. I'm going to turn and randomize and turn some things off and that sort of thing. And let's now start this. In fact, I'm going to turn on student feedback just for fun. So I'm going to start the presentation on my side, and you're going to see things pop up in that testing area. So as I start these messages, you will see things pop up. And the first question I have for you is just how to study. How long have you been studying for this Network Plus certification? There's a lot of different options available for Network Plus, a lot of things that you have to learn, a lot of objectives you have to go through. I would imagine usually it takes someone 3 to 6 months to study some of these topics. If you know networking, it will probably work a little bit faster than that. And you get to answer now how we do. In fact, I'll bring up on my screen so you can see how we're voting. And you can see that we have less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 9 months to a year, over a year, or I already have my Network Plus certification, thanks to M.A. Graham, who reminded me to put that in there. And in fact, 17% of you already have your Network Plus and you're attending. And of course, you can get continuing education credits for this. I'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation today. But I've got a lot of questions, so you're going to be going right back to the same page. You don't even have to change your browser. You don't have to change your app. You don't have to go to a different URL. I'll just simply be hitting these questions over and over right here in the same place. Very easy to follow along with what we're doing. Less than 3 months, 59% of you who are watching right now, less than 3 months studying. So that 3 to 6 month time frame, I think that's the sweet spot for the Network Plus. Of course, if you're like me, you get through month 3 or so, and then something happens and you end up having to do something else and you come back after over a year. I'm one of these 13% down here who will come back after a year or so. Oh yeah, I need to finish up what I started. Eventually I will get there, and that's pretty important. So I'm going to go through a lot of the things that you sent me. A lot of the questions that I created today, by the way, came directly from you. When you register for this, I send you to a site where you get an email that notifies, yes, we're doing this right now. But one of the things that I find really useful is that I'm able to take those questions and turn them into pop quiz questions, and that's what we're going to do today. A number of the questions that I got are about the Network Plus certification. And they're absolutely about this particular thing. The current Network Plus certification is called the N10005. If you have a book, if you have study materials, if you see things on the internet to look at, and you're trying to study for this particular version, which is the latest version and the only version of the Network Plus exam currently, all of your materials should say that these have been written for the N10005. Now, the N10005 was released on December the 1st, 2011. And for those of you that have followed along through the years and you've looked at some of the other CompTIA certifications, they tend to update these things about every 3 years. So I'm certainly thinking somewhere near the end of this year, beginning of next, we will probably see a new version of the Network Plus exam. If they do like they've done in the past, it'll be the N10006. I guess they could call it whatever they'd like. That's what I would expect it would be called. So right now, if you think about that, you've got about 6 months that you've got before the exam changes. But you actually have longer than that, because when they change the exam version, they also give you time where both exams could be taken. That would be horrible if you were studying for the exam, you're ready to take it, and suddenly it changed to a new version with new objectives and new information you had to know. They don't do that to you. So they give you a long time frame, usually about 6 months or so. So you could have at least a year right now before that exam, the N10005, went away and was retired. And at that point, you would have to take the N10006 or whatever that next version is going to be. This version has new things like virtual networking. There's some additional OSI emphasis in this exam. There's quite a bit more security that was added to the N10005. So if you try to study with the older N10004 materials, you're not going to have some of the new things that were added here. One of the advantages of network, though, is that the networking technologies do not change dramatically, or at least not as dramatically as something like an operating system might be. You know, we're talking about Ethernet and we're talking about copper cabling in this exam. Those are technologies that have been around for a very long time, and they continue to be used very popularly in all of our businesses, our organizations. So this isn't like this isn't like some of the older technologies and operating systems. If we went back to operating systems that came out when copper cabling came out, we'd be all studying DOS and other operating systems, the old Novell NetWare, the Banyan Vines for networking. Fortunately, we don't have to study all of those. But what you'll find is there will be smaller incremental changes. So don't worry too much even if you get close to the exam changing, don't worry about it being a dramatic difference. It won't be. It will be an incremental difference. There will be some new technologies on the new exam. They sometimes get rid of a number of old technologies as well that aren't used quite as much, but that should help answer a number of the questions that I got this month. Before we get into the questions, let me also remind you, if you're ready to take your exam, you've gone through all of my videos, and you just wish you had taken every bit of all of the graphics and all of the text from every single video and you had it in one place, I've created this for you. It is my Network Plus study guide. This study guide is a PDF document. It's immediately downloadable. It's something that is digitally there and available for you immediately. And I've taken everything from every presentation that I do in every video. So if you wanted pictures of cable types, pictures of fiber connectors, if you wanted to know the text from all of the different security section of the exam, it's all in here. So everything is in there, 11 pages in this PDF document, and it's $10. It goes to help what we do with the site. One great thing about the Professor Messer site being so popular is that we have a lot of people visiting and watching the videos, but it does take a lot of money. We're over $1,000 a month to do the hosting on the website, and every single bit of this goes back to support. And I want to thank everybody for supporting us with the purchase of those study guides throughout the month. I can't tell you enough how much that really helps what we're doing. Okay, it's time for questions. Let's see how much you know. Let's see, we're going to start with an interesting kind of a security question, but it is a lot about networking and it's a lot about file transfer protocols. And the question is more of a true or false question. Let's do it. Let's see, go to the next question here. I'll click the next button. So this is a question that asks on an FTP bounce attack. Okay, true or false? An FTP bounce attack works by directing or bouncing a transfer to a port number on a third device. Is that how it works? Is that what a bounce attack is? Where you can answer true or false. I'm trying a true or false question right off the bat. This is a new format for the Socrative application because it tells you immediately the feedback of how you did. I try not to do too many true or false ones there, but this topic is one that's very specific. There is a specific section of the Network Plus requirements that talks about an FTP bounce attack. So you have to know what the bounce attack is, or at least understand what people are doing with that bounce attack. And so I wanted to provide at least a place where we could start typing in what that bounce attack is, or at least get an understanding of what those things are. Or you can tell me, yeah, I know what a bounce attack is. Or you might say, I'm not quite so sure. And once we figure out what people think about the bounce attack, then I'm going to show you what the bounce attack is. Again, you can go to the Socrative.com website or use the Socrative student app on your Google Play, your iTunes, your Apple's iTunes store. You can go to the Windows Store and download the app. So it's some good information to have to know these bounce attacks. There's a whole section of the Network Plus certification that talks about different kinds of attacks. And these are very important to know because you will get good examples, the monthly updates from Microsoft. And those monthly updates will say this particular vulnerability that you need to patch has a buffer overflow, or it has a command execution, or command, those types of things, especially remote command execution. Those types of attacks and security pieces you'll get into in great depth in the Security Plus exam, but you still need to understand a number of them for the Network Plus exam. Let's see how we did on this particular answer. The question is, an FTP bounce attack works. See if I can make this a little bigger so we can read it. By directing or bouncing a transfer to a port number on a third device, 62% of you said absolutely true. 38% said nuh-uh, not the case, not buying it. That is not what that thing is. So what is this bounce attack, and why would someone use this? First, you should know that an FTP bounce attack is a relatively unusual thing to find these days. This was a vulnerability in some very early versions of FTP. Most FTP servers, the software that you would run on a device, that software generally does not allow an FTP bounce attack any longer because it was such a well-known way to redirect traffic somewhere else. The way an FTP works is it's sending information. You as the source, you're logged into the FTP server. That's the device in the middle. And when you send information to this server, you're telling it to, here's a command, and here's where I would like you to send the results of that command. And in fact, you could see there's a port, and it gives you this 192.168.0.5, port 135, and you're telling it to go run the list command and give me the answer to the list command on 192.168.0.5 on port 135. But wait, I'm on 192.168.0.8. Why am I'm telling the FTP server not to send the answer to me, to send the answer somewhere else. And that is the bouncing. I should not be able to do that, because what people would do was send information to that port 135 over on that device and see if that device responds on that port number. It's almost like running a port scan like you would do with Nmap, but you're running the port scan using a third party and you're using it from an FTP server. So this allowed some of the bad guys. This is more of a recon. So in the chat room, somebody's saying, is this brute forcing? Are you trying to get into the other machine? You're not. You're really just doing reconnaissance. You're really just trying to find a way to communicate to that device. In extreme circumstances, you could also send malicious software or something malicious. If there was a vulnerability on the .5, you could send it via the FTP server. That would be a very specific instance of this and very difficult to do. It's most often used for something like a port scan or to do reconnaissance of those devices. So for those of you that answered yes, this is a redirection, a bouncing of a transfer or information to a port number on a third device, you would be absolutely correct. Give yourself a bell, something. Give yourself a gold star. Count 1 on that piece. So let's change our direction then. Let's do another question for us and go to question number 2. And I'll click the next button on my Socrative. So you will see this also. In which of these cases would you be most likely to use a loopback plug? And I've got some different options there for you to look at. Is it to test end-to-end WAN connectivity? Does it validate the operation of physical router interfaces? Does it troubleshoot routing tables? Is it used to configure VLANs, or does it block all outbound file transfers? What would a loopback plug be used for? This is one of those things that from a loopback perspective, you need to know these things in the networking world. There will be times when this loopback plug will be very useful. In fact, it's one of these times where usually it's sitting there waiting for you to use it. And when you're ready to use it, you can't find it. It's one of the hardest things about a loopback plug. It's a physical plug. So if it's a physical plug, well, how could I use this? Would it be used to those things? Test end-to-end WAN connectivity, validate operation. Again, no answering in the chat room. And if you're just joining us, we are answering these questions on the Socrative site, Socrative.com. Click the student login and go to the room name Professor Messer. So let's look to see what the answers are. You know, when I put these questions together, I'm trying to think of questions that are going to fool us. And it's not to be mean. It's really because if you don't know something or you get something wrong, or in my case, you break something, whenever you go through the process of learning it or fixing it or understanding what you got wrong, you're learning something. So I'm hoping that I'm at least hitting some of those as we go through this today. Let's see the results. Are we testing end-to-end WAN connectivity? 35% of you said yes, we are. Are we validating the operation of physical router interfaces? 50% of you said yeah, you're testing physical router interfaces. 6% of you said troubleshooting routing tables, and 6% of you said block all outbound file transfers. Nobody said configure VLANs. I guess people have configured VLANs before. You know, that's not what you would do with that piece. So what is a loopback plug used for? Well, it's used to test physical ports themselves. And I also mentioned in my presentation here that you can also fool your applications as well. And some applications with older operating systems needed the network ports to be up and running. And in fact, a number of routers and switches and even firewalls these days will do certain things if the port is active, and you can plug a loopback plug in to make it come active, to fool the device into thinking that that particular interface is active. There are all kinds of loopback plugs. There are serial loopback plugs. You don't see these used much anymore, but for WAN connections that are serial based, it might be, I didn't mention here a V.35 loopback, but there could be RS-232, there could be serial. There's certainly T1 loopback and fiber type loopback. one important thing to consider, whoops, let's go back. You're going to have to see this piece, is that loopback plugs themselves, they sound like it's a crossover cable, but it's not a crossover cable. These are different types of plugs. In fact, whether you're thinking of serial or Ethernet or T1 or fiber connections, they're all different kinds of loopback plugs. And if you just go to Google, this is what I like to do, go to Google, you type loopback plug, you click the image link on there to search for it, you'll see tons of images of loopback plugs. They're all a little bit different. So this is one of those things that when you need it, you need it. And usually you're trying to troubleshoot some hardware. So this is how a loopback plug would be used. I'm working on a router. It's over a WAN connection. And I notice in the router that the statistics in this device are incrementing errors. It's just constantly saying every once in a while I'll get errors on the line. It says that traffic has come in to this port and it's not in a good shape. It's been corrupted in some way. This is not a valid frame. This information I'm throwing onto the floor, they're going to have to send that again because I can't make heads or tails of this. So what you'll do, of course, is you'll call your WAN provider and you'll tell your WAN provider, I've got a problem here. I'm seeing errors, but now you have to figure out where it is. Is the error in the physical port of the router? Is it in the cable between the router and the CSU DSU? Is it between the CSU DSU and what we call the DMARC, the mark of demarcation in your data center? That's the box that the telco provider, the WAN provider, puts on the wall. And is it that cable that goes from the CSU DSU to the DMARC? And then, of course, from the DMARC, it's all belonging to the telco. And what the telco will do will say, well, I don't know, maybe the problem's on our end. Maybe there's a squirrel outside that has gnawed through some of that cable. Let me send a message down to my DMARC, and I'm going to put it into a loopback mode in software, which effectively gives the provider a way to send traffic all the way to the DMARC. It turns around right in the DMARC. It never even gets into your equipment, and it goes right back to the telco again. And what they'll do is send some very specific streams of test data down, and they'll see if they receive exactly the same data on the other side. This is called a loopback test. And that way they can say, no, the problem, at least on our side, we're good. I'm talking all the way to DMARC and all the way back. And so now you as the network administrator has to now start swapping things out. And in the case of the router, how do you test to see if the router port is sending information properly, or the server port, or the port on this device you're using? You would use a loopback plug to plug it into that connection. And usually these routers and other devices also have a loopback test inside of them where they'll run their own set of data through. It'll go out the loopback plug and right back in again. And if you're sending and receiving the same thing, you can at least to some degree feel a little better about that particular interface working the way you would expect. This is one of the things you always have to go through when you're troubleshooting and making these things happen. You have to run these tests over and over and over again. So for those of you, the 56% who said validate the operation of physical router interfaces, you would be absolutely correct. I'm sorry, folks, that said test end-to-end WAN connectivity. I guess to some degree it could be used for that, but that's a very specific case, and you're not really testing end-to-end WAN connectivity. You're really testing everything that goes in and goes out of one interface. So kind of a curveball I threw on you there. You have to read these questions very carefully, read the answers very carefully, make sure you parse the entire question and the entire answer so that you don't read test connectivity. Yes, it's used to test it doesn't actually test any connectivity when you start thinking about loopbacks. So let's throw another question at you. This is going swimmingly, isn't it? So let's try another one. Let's try this one, which is, on which of these networks would you be most likely to use CSMA CA? CSMA CA. And I've got different options for you. There's 10BASE-2 Ethernet. There's 802.11g Ethernet. There's 10BASE-T Ethernet. There's gigabit Ethernet over fiber. There's a lot of Ethernets and fibers and things going on here. But only one of them would really be used with CSMA CA. So this is one of those things that I like to do with these questions, is I like to make these questions two-step questions. First, you have to know what CSMA CA is, and then at that point, you would have to know how it's applied, where you would use it, what networks use this CSMA CA. It's used, of course, in alphabet soup. That's where you would use it. To answer, of course, you go to the Socrative.com, go to the student login. You've got it by now. All of you are answering these questions by now. You can put in any name for the student and you can use the room name, Professor Messer. And you'll be taken to that page and it'll just keep giving you answer over and over and over again. Again, no answering in the chat room. And certainly for those of you that know it, I think there are plenty of us that are still learning it. So one of those things that is a challenge with networking is there's so much to the networking field. So this is a question that really focuses on how the network operates at kind of a lower level, at kind of that layer 1, layer 2 functionality of the OSI model. So let's see how we did. Of the folks that have answered this, we've got 33 of 30, 35 of 57. Nobody has said 10-base-2 Ethernet. Most of you are saying, what in the world is 10-base-2 Ethernet? Well, in this particular case, that would be Ethernet over coax, so it's not a baseband connectivity. That's what that is. 802.11g Ethernet, that would obviously be a wired or Wi-Fi Ethernet type functionality, 52% of you. And then we're kind of split here, 10-base-T Ethernet, 20%, and gigabit Ethernet over fiber, 22%. So we've got a few differences here to pull from. So let's break down this word first, the CSMA CA. See what in the world this thing is. And if we look at it, the last two letters, CA, stand for collision avoidance. And already you can sort of see what the answer might have been on this particular question, because this is what you would commonly use, not always used on wireless networks, but it's common if you're going to see it, it's going to be on a wireless network that you would see it. That is because a wireless network doesn't have the luxury of a wired network. On a wired network, whenever you're sending information out of an Ethernet, physical Ethernet wired interface, you don't hear what you're sending on the receive. There's separate pins, there's separate copper cables for the send and for the receive. So when you're sending information, you can still listen on the copper side. Well, with wireless, you don't have that. With wireless, it's a radio station. And as you're broadcasting your radio information, you're also effectively overloading your receiver on this device. It's sort of like if you've got you've got a megaphone that you're sending information out of, and there's speakers right here that are repeating everything that you're saying into that megaphone. If somebody did say something down there, you'd never be able to hear what they were saying. So that's a little bit of a problem on a wireless network. You could send a lot of information, but did it get to the other side? Did somebody else talk at the same time? How could you possibly avoid this collision? You avoid it using CSMA CA. This is common to see if the wireless network or whatever you're using has been set up. We did this with modems back in the day. You certainly see it on wide area networks often, is the ready to send and clear to send signals. So what you're doing is setting up kind of a way for everybody to participate together so that, hey guys, I'm ready to send some information. And then there would be devices on the network said, okay, you are clear to send. Everybody be quiet. James is going to say something. Okay, James, you may speak now. And then that way you're avoiding any collisions out here on the network. This also solves a problem with wireless networks when the device that is on the far side can't hear the device that is on the other far side because there's an access point in the middle. Both devices can talk to and hear the access point, but they can't hear each other. So how in the world would both sides know when to talk? Well, they talk to the access point and say, hey, I'm ready to send. And the access point tells everybody, okay, everybody be quiet. The guy over here, even though you can't hear him, he's clear to send. You go and do that. And that's why we call that collision avoidance. So we can make sure that we avoid any examples or any circumstances where two devices may be communicating at the same time. Very, very useful to have that capability there. And it means if we go to the question that was asked, this is on wireless. So the 59% of you that said 802.11g Ethernet, absolutely correct. You got that one right. All right, let's go to another question in the chat room. Make sure we've got that there. Do not answer in the chat room, but the answer that we have here is very similar to, well, we'll stick on the networking side of things with cabling and those types of things. Which of these would commonly use an MTRJ connector? Got a lot of buttons I'm pushing on my screen here to get all this up. Would I use MTRJ on frame relay, gigabit Ethernet, T1 WAN, broadband Ethernet? One of these is going to use an MTRJ connector. Again, one of those things where I like to give you a couple of different steps. First, you have to know what MTRJ is, and then you have to know how it's applied. Very useful for the Network Plus certification. you're trying to figure out all of these things on a Network Plus perspective. You're trying to know exactly what you need to know. Of course, there are an entire list of exam objectives, and that's really where I go to when you ask these questions, and when you're registering for this, and I'm putting them into this mode of questions and answers. I'm going through that list as well and making sure that the things I'm asking you are really coming from the exam objectives. So you can be assured if you're watching this live or you're watching the replay and you're wondering, am I going to be, I need to know that for the exam? That's the question every student wants to know. Do I need to know this for the exam? Yes, you do need to know this for the exam. That's an important consideration. So of course you can go to Socrative.com, Socrative.com. I will get this right eventually. I promised last week that I'd figure out how to say it, and I did. Now, of course, I'm not saying it right. And go to the Professor Messer room, go to Professor Messer, and answer that one. So let's see what our results are of this. And again, I'm throwing things out at you maybe you haven't heard before, because 22% said frame relay, 39% said gigabit Ethernet, 26% said T1 WAN, and 12% so far broadband Ethernet. So what is this MTRJ? Well, it's a fiber connection type. This is one of the challenges you will have when you get into a data center. Usually it's a data center or a comm room or a place where you have fiber runs. Any place you have fiber, you're going to run into a challenge because you have to know exactly the type of connector you're going to use on the end of the fiber, because there's 4 or 5 different connector types that you could possibly see today when you walk into a data center. This is just one of them. This is the MTRJ. Mechanical transfer registered jack. You could also see this referred to as media termination recommended jack. Can we make this harder on ourselves with all these crazy names? The important part of this particular kind, and it's kind of hard to see here, but both of the fiber strands are inside of this. It's a small type of connector. It's designed to be very tiny. Not very tiny, but certainly smaller than the other, relatively speaking. To the other fiber connectors, it's one of the smallest. And when you're working with these very large and high density switches and routers, you can have a switch that can have 100 ports, more than 100, 144, over 200 ports on a single physical chassis. And to be able to get the amount of density we need for all of these devices that are connecting, we need to fit as many ports as possible. So there's a real estate problem. We have only so much room in a chassis. It fits in a 19-inch rack. So you've got 19 inches. To make it bigger, you can only go taller and smaller. You know, that's all you can do is go vertically and not horizontally, because your horizontal is stuck to 19 inches. So in that particular case, if you've got smaller ports, I can fit more interfaces onto a single slot in this chassis. So the manufacturers love these tiny interfaces so they can plug these in. Well, fiber, the traditional fiber interfaces tend to be kind of big, and you're plugging it in. Some of them even larger, are taking up more room than a standard Ethernet copper cable. So that's one of those that really does really come into play when you're in a data center. So if you're working with fiber and somebody says, we need a fiber patch, we need to go from that switch over there to that patch panel over here, can you go grab a fiber patch that will do that? And your first question should be, what type of connectors are on each side of this? Because the fiber that you will need will have, maybe it's MTRJ on one side and SC on the other. But you won't know that until you go check those. And then, of course, you have to make sure that both of those sides are the correct fiber type. There's a lot of other things you have to know, but you certainly need to know the MTRJ. And in the chat room, people are saying it needs special tools. Well, very rarely would you be the one creating or building a fiber patch cable. We usually don't create these ourselves. It takes some specialized equipment to be able to put together any type of fiber connector, because you're dealing with light, and if you don't do it correctly and the light is inhibited in any way, if you didn't put that connector on properly, you will lose signal, which means you won't be able to run the fiber as long as you would like. There's some connectors like this that as they get smaller, they're harder to make. So there's also that challenge associated with them. Usually you're buying the fiber, it's a certain length, and it goes a certain way. There's some very large organizations that do have people on site that are trained to not only do the cable for you, but also build fiber for you as well. Very unusual to find that, however. And it is much more common, and even I can create my own copper patch cables. Fiber, though, I'll leave that to someone else. It takes a lot of time. You have to polish the end of the fiber, and you have to take the polishing and you have to run it in figure 8 patterns over the fiber. Painful. Just painful to be able to do that. So for those of you that did answer this question, frame relay, gigabit Ethernet, T1 WAN, broadband Ethernet. If you chose gigabit Ethernet, the 45% of you, absolutely correct. Frame relay generally is brought into a facility over a serial connection. Usually it's T1, although it could be T3, could be coax. You're running that particular piece. It could be T1 WAN is also generally a copper serial connection. And broadband Ethernet usually brought into a facility also on copper, usually on coax, and therefore you wouldn't be using an MTRJ because MTRJ is for fiber. Okay, this next question is one of the few times on the exam where you may need to do some calculations. Fortunately, the calculation's relatively easy, so get your piece of paper and a pencil if you need it, because usually when I do these questions, I do, because I'm asking you what the decimal equivalent is of 1001. And now you have to answer this. Your possible answers are 153, 4, 18, 152, 255. That's also the scores from the game last night. Time for baseball scores: 2-3, 1-0, 4-4. Ended in a tie. I guess that game's in progress. There is a lot that you have to do with binary calculations on the Network Plus exam, especially when it comes to subnetting. You'll be doing subnetting the rest of your life with networking. So not just in IPv4, you're going to be doing a lot of calculations with IPv6. It's important to know how to convert between binary and decimal and back again. So I like to ask these questions. So I didn't ask a subnetting question this month, but I did try to give you a perspective of what a subnetting question might be. So think this one through. And some of you just maybe guessing. There's no penalty, of course, for guessing. We can do that as well. So do what you have to do to make that calculation. No cheating. Don't bring up your calculator. Don't bring up your decimal octal binary conversion calculator. That's cheating. You have to figure it out yourself. Okay. So let's see how we did. We've got a few people that have answered so far, and we've had 50% of you said 153. None of you said 4. We've got 15% that said 18, 13% said 152, and 21% said 255. So what is the answer? What could this possibly be? Well, let's step through it. First, let's step through how you would calculate this and the basics of binary math. So on your piece of paper, I want you to just write down these little green markers. Just start in the far right and put a 1, and then double it. Double 1 is 2. What's double 2? 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 plus 8 is 16. 16 plus 16, 32. 32 plus 32, 64. 64 plus 64, 128. So if you take each one of those and you put them in their own little column, right? So everything in binary is either a 0 or a 1. So whenever we looked at the number I just gave you, 1001, 1001, there's 8 digits there, and they all fit underneath these green numbers that we wrote down. Usually we do this in sets of 8, which makes it a little easier to be able to work with. This is an octet. This is 8 of them. So you may hear, especially when doing subnetting, that we're talking about the third octet. That's what we're referring to when we say that. So it's useful to have this conversion chart. This is a conversion chart for you that will convert between decimal and binary. So the question we had earlier is, what is binary 1001 in decimal? So first thing you should do is write out 1001 and put right on top of that your conversion chart. This is all you have to do. Simple addition. There's no complexities to this at all. It's one of the things I love about decimal to binary conversions. There is nothing that you would have to do that's very difficult. Now, every place there is a 1, I want you to bring down that number. So there's a 1 under the 128. There's not a 1 under the 64 that gets a 0. There's not a 1 under the 32 that gets a 0. There's a 1 under the 16, bring down the 16. So every place there's a 1, bring down the number from your conversion chart. Every place there's a 0 gets a 0. Okay, that's pretty easy. Now add them all up. So you would add up 128 plus 16 plus 8 plus 1, and the number you get is 153 decimal. And if you go back to looking here, those of you that have done those calculations now, oh yeah, I remember how to do that. 71% said yes, 153 That's exactly what we want it to be able to do. That's the number you want right there with 153. If you ever need to take and convert back, or you're trying to figure out what number is 153 in binary, you simply reverse the process. You take all of your numbers, and there's only going to be a certain set of ones and zeros that comes up with that piece. So in the videos on doing this binary math, I take you through both of those. So you see the thought idea and the process of stepping through each one of those and understanding what to do with those pieces. If you are watching this video for CE credit, you want to be able to get an extra hour of CEs behind you, you can participate in that. I'll send you a little email certification that says, yes, I saw this. If you go to the top of the Professor Messer website and click on the Contact Us link and send me your email, inside of that, I'll ask for your email, and you will send me the code or the special phrase of binary conversion. So send binary conversion to me, and I will send you a certificate to be able to do that. Very useful to have that there. Also, as a point, we'll take a quick moment to thank our friends at GTS Learning. They're the folks that I partner with. If you've ever seen their books, my videos are in their books. They're not only in their digital ebooks that you can find, but they have in their printed books a QR code that you can click on that pops up my video that plays to go along with the content in their book. It's a great way to combine both my videos and the book, and it really is a nice partnership. And they're great folks. I like working with them, and I like their training materials. They have, for the Network Plus certification, these live labs that you can work with. And one of the things I like about the labs is it allows me now to do some of these practical applications of what you're learning. This is the biggest issue, of course, when we're talking about the newest CompTIA exams, is that it requires you to not only know the answers for the multiple choice section, but they have what they call performance-based questions. These performance-based questions could be fill in the blanks. They could be putting things in a certain order. It could be listing out the slowest to fastest of a certain network type. It could be a simulation. They could put up a command line and expect you to perform a certain type of command. This is one of the things that is useful if you have all of these things already on your computer ready to go. But if you'd like to set up your own lab and you'd like to have a machine capturing packets and have an Active Directory server and be able to do some Windows transfers between those and capture the information and see what's going on, what becomes a little bit more of a challenge to do something like that? Well, with the GTS Learning Labs, we do all of this in real time. In fact, I've got the GTS Learning Labs up right now. Here's a section for the Network Plus on configuring DHCP servers and clients. I'm going to start that one by clicking on the name. And what this brings up, you can see on the left side, are all these virtual devices, a server, a client, a gateway, a router, and a window or a device running LAMP. So you've got the whole web server package there to be able to run everything all at one time. Let's start these up to get these running. So you've got the Linux, and you've got the Apache, and you've got the PHP, you've got the database, all running on that one device. It's effectively the same thing I'm running on my Professor Messer Windows server, or my web server. It's not running Windows, running Linux. This is also a nice front end because it gives you the labs on one side. You can see how the lab's laid out, and you can pop that out and look even further, and I can even step through the lab, and it tells you with screenshots exactly what you should be doing in the lab. As these devices start up, I can then connect to them, and this is all done virtually. Someone last week was saying, well, gosh, isn't there a lag at being able to do that? You're running effectively a remote desktop into not just a virtual environment. This is a real lab. This is not one of those packages you buy that's all self-contained that pretends to be a Windows front end, which is really what the exam does for you. This is really running Windows. It's really running Wireshark. It's an actual operating system. So you didn't have to go out and buy any of the operating system things either. I don't think the gateway, it does have some credentials I can log into. So there's the connection. It's running Windows Server, and there I'm connected. I'll just start some things up so you can get a feel for it. Look how fast that is. There's no lag here. That's very nice. So let's start a capture up here. We're running Wireshark. Let's just start with whatever the defaults. Oh, we don't have anything set for default. So let's start it up. Let's choose an interface. That's a good one. Start the packet capture, and we'll start grabbing packets from the internet, from the network connection. At the same time, I'll start up a server. Here's a server, and so I can now run through configuring a DHCP server. We can capture the DHCP packets. We can understand now the DHCP process when it has some offers, and it acknowledges the offers, and then you finally get an IP address. You can see all of that happening, all from this device. Great virtual system to be able to do this, and the folks at GTS Learning have got a special price on it. If you go through my link, if you go to the GTS Learning site itself, it actually costs more. But if you go to professormesser.com/netlabs, you'll get a special price on these labs, $99 for a whole year. Now, if you think maybe I'm not going to use this, you can use this lab free for an hour. You can sign up right now, and for an entire hour, you've got access to the lab. So it gives you an opportunity to try it out, see if it's for you, see if it's something you're going to want to use, and then at least you've now stepped through it and you understand, yeah, this is for me, or maybe not, and at least we tried it for an hour and we're in good shape, and we've at least given it a shot. So that's one of those times where it can really work out for you to try it out and see if it's there, and you might even find that you didn't even have to build your own lab in your house. It's all sitting here for you, all ready to go on the live labs. And we want to thank GTS Learning for helping to support our live streams and to make all of this available, and especially for their pricing. There's our great folks over at GTS Learning, and we want to thank them very much. Back to our questions. Get ready. If you have not logged into the Socrative, I got it right that time, link, then you can log in and go to the room named Professor Messer. The next question I have for you is relating to routing. So which of these is a link state routing protocol? Which of them is a link state routing protocol? There is OSPF, there's RIP, there's BGP, there's RIP version 2. Which one of these is a link state routing protocol? Link state routing protocol. So again, another two-step process. You have to know what link state is, and then you have to know how the protocols work, and then you'll be able to get this one right. So we got a few folks that are responding now. This is one of the nice things I like about the Socrative method here that we have, this website, is that I give you the answers, or I give you the questions immediately, and they pop up immediately on your screen or on your mobile device. You don't have to wait for the stream to catch up to you, which is kind of nice too, to have that there. It's one of those nice pieces. So let's see how we're doing with this. Don't answer in the chat room. No fair to answer in the chat room with those pieces. Let's see what we're doing here. You can see that 75% of you said, oh, it's clearly OSPF. 13% of you said, no, it's RIP. Another 16% of you said, no, it's BGP. And nobody said RIP v2, which is interesting. You'd think that RIP would be, but not RIP v2. Shouldn't they both be? Are they the same thing? What's the difference? Well, you're going to have to find that one out on your own, because we're going to focus instead on just link state routing at the moment. Oh, we're not. Let's actually describe the two different methods. Really, there's three you'll run into, but you'll certainly run into two major kinds. One is called distance vector routing protocols. And distance vector routing protocols determine how to get to another location based on how far away it is. This is the distance to this. And the distance is usually determined based on number of hops. How many routers have I got to go through to get to that site? Well, if it takes 7 routers, 7 hops to get to that site, and it takes 2 hops to get to this site, I'm going to go the way where it's closer. The distance is smaller. And of course, your distant metrics could be other things as well. But generally, with these types of protocols, it's something like distance vectors, usually using hops. So that's how we determine which way to go. What vector should I go? We go the shortest distance, and that's why we call them distance vector. This is something that's done with most of these dynamic routing protocols. You don't really have to do anything. You effectively turn the routing protocol on. There may be some minor configurations you have to do on the routing protocol configuration itself, but you don't put in any routes yourself with these types of protocols. This isn't like static routing where you have to tell every routing device how to get to every other network. You can imagine on a network with many routers across many locations around the world, that can be tedious. And every time you add a new network, you got to go back to every other router and add that network link into the routing table. That would be ponderous. That's why these dynamic routing protocols are so useful. We just turn on the routing protocol, all the routers talk to each other. Hey, how you doing? Oh, hey, how are you? Well, tell me what routes you know about. Well, here's the ones I know about. Tell me the ones you know about. And then everybody shares their information, and they now know how to get from place to place without you having to type anything in. And they work just like that. They have a conversation. Did you see the game last night? I sure did. This is really great types of protocols on the distance vector side to use if you have a relatively small network, and you could immediately, you could probably have seen a problem with this scenario. If you got 3 hops to go one place and 2 hops to go to the other, distance vector is going to go the 2 hops. But what if those 2 hops are over barbed wire and the other 3 hops are running over 100 megabit Ethernet? Well, the 3 hops would actually have been better. So this isn't the best possible scenario with this distance vector. Distance by itself is probably not the sole metric you should use to determine what routes you are going. But some of the things that you will find using distance vector are RIP version 2, and BGP. Those are, generally speaking, distance vector routing protocols. So there's another type of routing protocol that uses link state. And link state is, at its most basic level, is if there's a link or a connection to that location, we will take it. If the link is not there, then we won't take it. It recognizes where these links are and what they're doing. It also considers other metrics as well, things like the speed of the link. So in the scenario we were talking about earlier, where it was 2 hops over barbed wire or 3 hops over 100 megabit Ethernet, well, now with these types of routing protocols, they can possibly take advantage of some of those types of metrics as well. This means that I could use a lot of different scenarios. I can scale it very well. It's something that I can use in a very large network, and usually it's OSPF. It's a very good example of this. ISIS is one that is used by, usually it's over on the service provider side. You don't generally see that in the corporate or enterprise world. Usually see OSPF being used mostly in the enterprise world to have this connection and use this dynamic routing to these remote locations. Very useful to have there. So for those of you that said OSPF, the 66% of you that said link state, yep, that's OSPF, you are absolutely correct in that case. Again, get that nice star for your link state routing protocol. All right, let's do another one. We're doing well here on time. For those of you that have called in, the phone number, of course, is on professormesser.com/live. I will be taking calls after we get through all of these questions this first hour or so. So make sure you make a note of that. But in the meantime, I have more questions for you. And the question is, which of these protocols is used to automate the configuration of DNS settings? You got a few options here. Automate the configuration of DNS settings. You would use RIP, you would use bind, you would use OSPF, you would use DHCP, you would use TFTP. I have many different options there for you to choose from. Again, no chatting about the answers with those, I guess, until we finally get the answer out there. In the meantime, it's a secret. In the meantime, don't tell anybody at all what the answer is. And I can see you're already answering those questions in there. One of the things that you'll be working a lot with in the networking infrastructure is automation. Whether it's automating the backups from your routers, automating addressing information, automating how things work on the network side of things, automation's great. And so it's important to understand a lot of these automating functions and protocols so that you will not be thrown by them when you first see them. And the question asking, configuration settings on a client or a server? How about both? This is used to just generically speaking to automate the configuration of DNS settings. It's a very sort of, I won't say it's a vague question. It's a very specific question on what I'm saying here. Don't read too much into it. That's an important consideration with these exam questions, is you have to look at every question as its own little world. So not only do you have a question here, don't get hung up on the question. You should read the answers to help give you context to what the question is asking, because the question is spot on. I spend some time when I write these questions, I read them, I try to interpret them a certain way. These are all my questions. I write them before we have these events. So I'm not grabbing them from somewhere else. And I sit here and I change the questions around quite a bit before I finally give them to you. So that's one of those things that is important to consider whenever you're working with those. So let's see. Yes, once I show the response, you can absolutely talk about it because I'm going to talk about it. And the responses so far shows that 2% said RIP, 24% said bind, 2% said OSPF, 67% said DHCP, and 5% said TFTP. I think we have at least a lot of people that have said, well, it's DHCP. Usually we think about DHCP not as DNS settings, but as IP addressing. So something here is not quite right with our thought process. So let's look at what these types of automated protocols do. And the automated protocol we're going to talk about is DHCP. DHCP, we think about as giving people IP addressing, but the DHCP process can configure automatically many different configuration settings on your devices, not just the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. It can configure DNS settings, TFTP servers, put settings inside of your device. If this device is a telephone, a voice over IP device, that voice over IP telephone will get voice over IP specific configuration parameters. So DHCP, very powerful. It can send down the wire quite a number of different things. In a voice over IP case, those are called DHCP options that are sent through on there. This is a very old protocol. It's been around for a while. It started as a protocol called BootP for the Bootstrap protocol. BootP, though, was great for its time, but it didn't include a lot of the things that we need on our more modern operating systems. So it also didn't keep track of when IP addresses were made available again. So we needed some way not only to give the addresses, but also to free the addresses up. That's why we created the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP. Came out in 97. Back in the 1900s, we were running DHCP. It's been around for that long. It's been working great. DHCP is a great protocol, and we've made changes. For instance, voice over IP, not something we were doing a lot of in 1997, but as the voice over IP technologies were there, we added other capabilities to DHCP to do things like DHCP options. A great set of protocols. They run swimmingly. A very simple process, really. You've got a client workstation down here that needs an IP address, and it's going to send a discover command. Again, it doesn't have an IP address, so it sends a message out across the network as a broadcast, and it can even hop through routers. If you've told your router to also be a DHCP forwarder, normally broadcasts don't go through routers, but you can tell some routers that, by the way, if you see a DHCP broadcast, send that one on through. And in fact, that's what we did in this picture. And once the DHCP servers, in this case, multiple DHCP servers, see that information, they send a response back, an offer back, again, over the broadcast that says, okay, well, here's some options for you that you might like from a DHCP perspective. Grab one of those. Grab one of those IP addresses and see what you like. And again, it passed through that router. Now, the DHCP server is way down here. How did the DHCP server know that it came from that particular subnet? Well, there's settings that you configure on the router whenever it's forwarding that it's going to forward it from a particular interface. Therefore, the DHCP server knows where that came from. There's some other ways to do that as well. We aren't going to go into the specifics of that. There's some information you can put in the packets themselves to show that information. So the client workstation says, that's great. I'm going to take this particular response. Of course, this broadcast would go everywhere, but the only one this was directed to was this original DHCP server on the local subnet. And at that point, the DHCP server says, great, you're the big winner. You can keep that IP address. I acknowledge, in fact, that you are now the owner of that IP, and there you go. We're in good shape. So for those of you, before I put that question up, those of you that answered DHCP as number D, letter D, symbol D, you would be absolutely correct. Oh, we're doing stuff now. I got another one for you. I kind of popped it up there on the screen really quick. Which one of these would be the best choice for troubleshooting an MTU? Are you down with MTU? Then you should know the best choice for troubleshooting the MTU. I've got some options for you. Would you use, if you were just sitting down, you're having a problem understanding if the MTU was right, trying to be vague here, would I use ping? Would I use route? Would I use traceroute? Or would I use netstat to troubleshoot this? Which would I try? The first thing I would do, how could I test the MTU? How could I determine what the MTU was? How's that for some examples of things you should try to figure out based on the vague nature of my attempt to give you a hint. So would I use ping, route, traceroute, or netstat to be able to test an MTU? MTU. What is an MTU? What is that? I don't know. And that's where you need to find out. So we'll go to the Socrative.com, go to Professor Messer's The Room Name, and answer what you think it would be. I love it when this happens. We've got like a horse race. It is right there. A lot of you said ping. No, it's traceroute. No, it's netstat. On my screen, I've been watching it go back and forth with different devices. Oh, no, this one's winning. Now this one's winning. Now that one's winning. Now that one's winning. Those pieces going back and forth. What would be the best choice for troubleshooting this MTU? MTU. Is it something that's empty? It's nothing. No, it's not empty. It's not MTU. It's MTU. Mike Tango Uniform. The MTUs. This is one that you admittedly would rarely have to do, but it is a troubleshooting process that can absolutely help you whenever you're trying to fix this particular kind of issue. It is this is something that generally you run into when you're working most generally with VPNs, especially IPsec type VPNs, but it can be really on any network. You might have to deal with MTUs, especially if the network topologies are changing as it goes through the connection. It's not Ethernet all the way through. It's a tunnel, or it goes from Ethernet to a WAN back to Ethernet. And the maximum transmission unit, the maximum size of the data that you would put through the network can be an issue if you're ever sending traffic from one side to the other. Because if something is too big to get through a pipe, especially if you go through a tunneled connection, you may be sending full-size Ethernet frames. When you get to the tunnel can't take your full-size Ethernet frames because it has to tunnel them. It has to wrap itself around it, and now your frame's too big. So it has to tell, as you're starting this conversation, I can only accept this maximum transmission size to go through this tunnel. So if you're sending something to me and you don't want to fragment it, I mean, because Ethernet's great, TCP/IP is great. It'll break it up into tinier pieces and send the fragments through, but that usually comes at the cost of efficiency. It slows down the amount of traffic we can get through those particular links. If you want to maximize the efficiency, then you want to stick to what the maximum transmission unit is for the entire path all the way through. So when you get into those scenarios, then you want to be able to really understand the traffic that's going through. The problem you have with these types of scenarios is certain applications will send traffic, but there's a bit inside of your IP packet that says, don't fragment this data. So if you're sending a full-size Ethernet frame, you've set the bit that said, don't fragment the data. It gets to the tunnel, and the tunnel says, I've got to fragment this to get it through, but you've said, don't fragment. I'll throw you on the ground. Happy birthday to you, because now you can't get through. That's it. No way you're going to get that traffic through. We've got a stalemate. You've said don't fragment it, but I've got to fragment it to get it through. Therefore, it doesn't go anywhere. I dropped it on the ground. Usually, it actually sends a message back via ICMP that says you just sent me something that was a fragment that said don't fragment, and I couldn't send it. So I'm sending you a message back via ICMP that says sorry, this didn't work. You know, we often think of ICMP as ping. ICMP can do many, many different things. And this is just one example of one of the things that ICMP can do for hopefully the link between you and that device that's dropping your packet doesn't filter ICMP messages. We do that a lot on our enterprise networks. And yet again, another challenge of troubleshooting this. So the key then would be to understand between my machine and the one that's on the destination of where I want to go, how big of a packet can I send if I'm sending it with a don't fragment bit set? So a great tool to use for this is ping. Ping can send not only, hi, are you there, and get a response back. It can send, hi, are you there, please send me a response, and put a certain amount of data, just randomized data within the packet itself. And you can specify what the size of that is, and you could tell it, don't fragment. So you can send this out and just try full size. Can I send a full size 1500 bytes out, send it through? Well, maximum size 1472 once you have all the headers in place. 1472, can it get through? Ooh, it can't get through. I didn't get a response. I didn't get a ping. Let's take it down to 1,000. Let's take it down to 500. So you can now do your own tests. What is the maximum amount of information that I could squeeze out this connection to the other side and still get a response back from the other side? Use the ping command. And if you answered. The 36% of you that said ping were absolutely correct. Route command would tell you the route that information was taking, but it tells you nothing about the maximum size of the transmission unit that can be sent. Trace route will tell you, again, all of the hops between one side and the other, but again, we don't know the maximum size of the data being sent. And netstat doesn't give you any of that information either. It's very focused on your machine. Netstat's a great utility, tells you a ton of different things, tells you what executables have ports open on your device. It tells you who's communicating into your machine right now, machines you're communicating to. It doesn't tell you anything about the MTU, at least not the way we are using it in this particular case of troubleshooting. If you're troubleshooting the MTU, first thing you do, go to the ping. And that can really help you. Okay. Coming up on, is this our last question? Not quite yet. We're past an hour, I realize that. But I got lots of questions here. So here's another one for you. What's the minimum category of cable that can support 1 gig Ethernet? This is one of those things I think would be a good performance-based question, is they give you a bunch of categories of Ethernet. I don't know, so I haven't taken this version of the Network Plus, and really I'm holding back taking this version for this very reason. So I like to think about what different options might be given. This might even be a question on the exam. I don't know, because I haven't taken the exam, but I can have a list of all the categories, and I can have a list of different Ethernet standards, and I could say match the minimum category of cable for these Ethernet standards, and I would have to map those things out. That would be a great performance-based question. So we sometimes worry about these performance-based questions as being something we have to have a separate study materials for, but really it's the same material you've been studying with this whole time. Don't let it throw you a bit on this. The options you have for this category of cable are Category 3, Category 5, 5E, 6, and 6A. Ooh, it's a lot there to choose from. Quite a few options there to have available. In fact, I just threw up every category because I want to see, do you know what category for 1 gig Ethernet? It's got to be one of these. Which is it? In this case, I think there are a number of you that have indeed done this before. You've done some cabling. And I say this because we got a lot of people responding. Nobody put 6A. Very few people put 6. Very few people put 3. This is absolutely a mean. You know, how many standard deviations is this off, from the mean? Category 5E right in the middle. 68% of you said, yeah, it's 5E. But is it really? Do you really know what the categories are for this? These categories are started with Category 3, of course. We started really using twisted pair. Category 3 was one of the first ones we put in. We're running 4 megabit Ethernet or 4 megabit token ring, running 10 megabit Ethernet, and we were running a lot of Cat 3. We very quickly upgraded from Cat 3 though to Cat 5. One of those things that we were working with at Cat 5 allowed us to support the 100 megabit Ethernet, which was great. If you're running 100 meg Ethernet, that used to be it. It used to be the standard for everybody. These days, everybody's connecting via gig. And for gig, you need Category 5E. This is one of those times, if you're trying to answer that question, Category 5E is the one that supports 1 gig Ethernet. In fact, all of you said Category 5E. 63% of you said absolutely it was Category 5E. You would have been correct. If you were trying to do something with 10 gig Ethernet, at least over short distances, you would use Category 6. Usually when you're doing longer than Category 6, with Category 6A does 100 meters with 10 gig Ethernet. So in my scenario, I'm doing a lot more 10 gig with what I'm doing of transferring things between my NAS and some of my other systems. I like to get the speed that I need. In here, I could probably use Category 6 because I don't have a long distance to go in the facility that I'm in here. But if I need to go longer distances, I would do Category 6. So that, some nice capabilities there. So another question for you. Here's another one to throw up. I think we've got, this is my last question for you that I'll throw up on the screen here, which is, does it go to the next one? Did I click the next one? Uh-oh, it's not going the next one. See, it's not there. I got another, it says my quiz is in process, but it doesn't look like it is in process. Let's see. So which of these is not typically determined with a multimeter? And if I had a way to go to the next question here, I would do that. I wonder if I have a next question there. I wonder if I put it in here or not. I know I did. There's a couple that I put in here. Let's go to my dashboard and manage my quizzes. Let's see if we can get this one to show on the screen. If not, I will probably popped out of where you were. I'm going to look here and make sure I've got the answers in my list. And I do. Cable, yes. Which of these is not typically determined with a multimeter? Let's see if I can show you this quiz. Let's start a quiz. Let's see if I can get this popped up on your screen. It's probably going to pop through a bunch of options here. Change this. Teacher paste. Multimeters are great. Everybody should have a multimeter. If you don't, you need to get one. Oh, it says I started. Let's go to the quiz in progress. Can it go next? Cannot. It's just not going to do it. That's too bad. I'm going to try something though. Since we're doing this live and since we're trying different things, I'm going to start it all over again and get to that one and see if it works. Because what could that hurt, right? Confirm. So you're going to see this pop through. Don't answer the questions. Let's see. Is it going to go next? It's not. So this is probably something on my side that I'm done. So I'm going to give you these questions and you're just going to answer them right now on here. Since I've already got the message up on the screen, you're now going to wonder, what was that? What was the question? So we're going to do the question ourselves. So the question is, we're going to work with these things. Scroll. I'm going to blame these for doing this. So the question is, which of these is not typically determined with a multimeter? Is it near in crosstalk? Is it AC voltage? Is it continuity? Or is it DC voltage? Which one of those is it? And I'm going to try to log on to Socrative. Why do I do that? And see if I could run it in a different browser. See if that will work. Maybe it will. Who knows? Maybe it won't. Probably should have done that to start with. And we'll see if that does. Now the beauty, oh yeah, I'm seeing these pop through now. Here we go. Should have done that. Which of these is generally determined with a multimeter? Click. Boy, I popped through those fast, didn't I? It's okay. We'll take it out of there in post. Don't worry. No one will ever know. Which of these is not typically determined with the multimeter? So we can go to thesocrative.com into the Professor Messer room, and you can answer near and crosstalk, AC voltage, continuity, or DC voltage. One of these, whoo, got it working. I think that was a Chrome issue. That's the way it usually goes with the browsers. They work great until they don't work anymore, and then you're over it. I'm going to Firefox, which is what I've done. Take that, Chrome, as if Chrome has feelings on this. A multimeter is great to have because you can do almost anything with it, almost anything. There are a few things you can't do with it. One of the things you can't do, didn't fool anybody on the final question, 91% of you, near in crosstalk is a capability that you would typically have on a more advanced cable tester. So that is where you would get that piece there, near in crosstalk. You can absolutely check AC voltage. You can absolutely check continuity. You can absolutely check DC voltage with a multimeter. It's great for checking continuity through a cable. Does this pin connect to this pin? Yes, it does. You can plug it into your wall outlet to see how your AC voltage is. You can check batteries with your DC voltage to see how charged your batteries are. Everyone should have a multimeter. That's one of those things that you should absolutely have around. There's my multimeter right there. Took a picture of it, put it up for you. And you can run all kinds of great things on it. They look very daunting. Multimeters look like they're hard. But in reality, and there's plenty of YouTube videos that show you how to use a multimeter that really step you through all the different things you can do and really get something out of it. So be sure to take advantage of multimeters. They're so valuable and they're not very expensive. They look like they also could be very expensive devices, but the reality is that they're really not that expensive at all. They've got just a few bucks and you're good to go. So for those of you that did answer with that piece right there, you would be absolutely correct on that, to be able to do that. There's a number of other things that would be useful to go through with this piece, but we're now at an hour and 15 minutes. I like to keep these things to an hour to have those pieces there and available for you. And certainly there are certain things that information I would like to get from you as well. So one of the questions I have for you, somebody said, we need one more question. Well, you know what? I have one more question for you. And it's this question right here, which is, what topic would you like to cover in the next Network Plus study group? So if you would like some questions or like to cover certain topics, this would be a good place to add it in. Go to the Socrative.com front end. And this one is an answer where you can just type in anything to me. And I've got a big list that I'll pull down after this, and I'll keep those for the next month there to be able to see those pieces. That's one of those that can really come in handy for those pieces, is to be able to answer those. And of course, the things that you send in through the week are also, through the month, extremely useful for me as well, to be able to see those things. Great input to have that there. Well, of course, you can always follow what we're doing on the Professor Messer website. We're doing something all the time. Again, if you'd like to know more about my Network Plus study guide, you can find out more at professormesser.com/netsg. Again, subscribing on YouTube does amazing things, more than you will ever know. And of course, I do some things. Mostly it's my A+ pop quiz, but I'm trying to do more things on Twitter and Google+. Just go to professormesser.com and type something in, and you'll get there. You'll get to Google+, you'll get to Facebook, you'll get to all those places. Again, my thanks to GTS Learning for their fantastic live labs. If you go to professormesser.com/netlabs, get not only the live labs, all their book information, and some online tests come with that as well. Some very useful. And of course, I couldn't do all of this, any of this, if I didn't have the support and the emails and the messages and the constant chats that we do on the Professor Messer website all the time. Extremely useful to have that there. I can't thank you enough. And thanks for joining us again. If you're watching this live, we go to the after show and take your phone calls at this point. For those of you that are watching for your continuing education units, you're more than welcome to join us. But if not, we'll see you next time on the Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone. Let's stop our recording. Let's restart our recording. There's a lot going on there. Okay. All right. All right. Hour and 15. That was a little long. That was a little bit long with the ones today, with those recordings. Well, I do have the phone lines open. If you are looking to call in, you'll see the phone lines on professormesser.com/live. You can scroll down and see the phone lines, or you can call in to 347-989-8745. If you're calling in, I've got an 800 number, a toll-free number you can use on Skype of 855-235-4742. You should see those listed there. I do have other things I just didn't get a chance to go through in the presentation that people were asking about. So this would be a good time to talk about those things. And it really talked about some of the questions that came through about, there we go, how much of the test covers the requirements for cabling. Cable seems to be a sticking point, doesn't it? A little bit of one, sort of one, on the Network Plus exam. We tend to have a few of those. But if you get the exam objectives, go to professormesser.com/objectives. Takes you right to the exam objectives for CompTIA, and be able to do that. Very, very useful to have that there. That's one of those that every time someone comes into the chat and they say, I took the exam, I didn't do very well. One of the things that I ask is, did you download the exam objectives? And they said, what is that? There's a huge amount of information in these exam objectives. Download the exam objectives, professormesser.com/objectives. It will redirect you to CompTIA's website, and download those objectives. It tells you everything you need to know to be able to do that. Very, very useful to have that there. And it tells you every cable you need to know. It tells you every interface you need to know. I see some of these Network Plus books, and they've got a page of every possible fiber connector that was ever created in the world. That is extreme. You don't need to know all of those, but you do need to know some of those. And if you're trying to figure out which some of those do I need to know, it's in the exam objectives. Plain and simple. So definitely go to that. If you're looking to have those pieces with those exam objectives, those will tell you what you need to know. Very, very useful to have that there. Another question I got from WF said, how long do you need to study for the Network Plus exam? Can it be crammed? Can it be crammed? Sure, anything can be crammed. Generally, what I've seen is people tend to take 3 to 6 months of constant study, not overwhelming study. Every night you sit down, you read a little something in the book, you see how well you did with the end of the chapter, you go through these chapters, you watch the videos, maybe you get a QA guide, they ask you some more questions, maybe you get my study guide. And over 6 months or so, at a very casual pace, you should know everything you know. Now there are, and this has come up before as well, there are places where you can go and take a boot camp. First, the name concerns me because it sounds like push-ups are involved. But if there is a time where you see you can sit for 5 days and they run through every bit of information you would need to know for the Network Plus, and then even in some cases at the end of the boot camp, they actually have the exam or they give you a voucher where you can go take the exam. Sometimes there are even guarantees. I guarantee after this boot camp, you will pass or your money back or the money for the voucher back or something. I don't tend to recommend those unless you've gone through all of the study first. If you've read your book and it's been 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months and you've watched the videos and you've done the Q&A and you just want that final cram before you take the exam, that's really where I see these boot camps fitting. That's one of those that does come in handy when you're working with those pieces. There are a number of places you can go and take these all over the country. And I guess some people do better than others with them, but probably not the easiest way to learn what you need to know. So some of it can be crammed and memorized. Some of it's more useful if you sit at the command line and you perform some trace routes and you do some pings and you do some of the things we did today. Step through how these things work. How does DHCP work? What can I expect to see? Those are useful. Why would I check an MTU and why is that important? And in what cases would I use that? Those are interesting things to know. So some of that could be crammed, I guess, when you run into those, but it doesn't have to be, not always anyway, when you're working with it to be able to have that there. Okay, we don't have a ton of people. Nobody's in the queue right now, so we're good as far as the calls are concerned. We don't have to worry too much about those pieces. There was a question we had prior to the, before I talk about that, the question in the chat room is how do you get your CE credits? If you ever look at CompTIA CE requirements, watching or attending a live event like this can get you Network Plus CEs. And somewhere in the presentation, in that hour and 15-minute presentation today, I gave you a special phrase. So if you email me, the contact us link at the top of the Professor Messer website, and you email me with that phrase, I will send you an email certification that says, I certify that you, sir, did indeed at least watch this because you knew the secret phrase. So that's how you get credit for that. And hopefully CompTIA will take that. I think they will. I think that's legitimate. They don't know me and I don't know them, but I'm sure they can accept the certification. I keep it on file on my side. So if they were to come to me and said, did this person really do this? I'm like, well, he sent me the message and I've got the special code here, and he wouldn't have known that special word or special phrase unless he had actually watched it, which is why I give that out. So you can't just say, hey, I watched it, give me some credit. Sorry. You must at least send me the special phrase. And if you don't, I'll send it back to you and say, sorry, you didn't get it right. If you've sent me one and I didn't get it for some reason, you're welcome to send again, and I can send you the phrase for any of my study groups. I've got the big list, so I know on every study group what all the secret phrases are, and I can send you those things. So that's how you get CE credit for these. I was working with somebody. We were talking about something. That narrows it down, doesn't it? I was talking with someone earlier in the chat room. We were talking about the ARP command. the ARP command. So I'm going to go to Windows here and do the ARP command so we can see this. Where's my screen? Let me show you a screen here. Here we go. It's the ARP command. And they said it displays and modifies ARP, of course, being the address resolution protocol. It's the thing that takes IP addresses on our local subnet and tells us what MAC address is associated with the IP address. Reverse ARP does the reverse. Proxy ARP does it for someone else. ARP, we use a lot of ARP it is not the very beginning. It's in there somewhere. The secret phrase is somewhere in there. I don't do it at the beginning. What good would that be? Hey, I'll watch 5 minutes of it. Give me my credit. Nope. You're going to have to watch it. And that's a worldwide credit for the CEs, by the way. In the ARP command, there's a lot of references in Windows anyway. The ARP -- tells you the help about this. And it mentions in here inet_adder and eth_adder and if_adder. What in the world is inet_adder, eth_adder, and if_adder? It's kind of the question. And I have to agree, what in the world is that? Well, it's probably not well documented, is it? It's a shortcut way of saying the internet address is inet_adder. The Ethernet address that's what eth_adder is, and if_adder is the interface address. Okay, so there's 3 very different things. The inet address is effectively the IP address. So with the IP address for the ARP that I'm using here, it's IP version 4. So this would be the IPv4 address, 192.168.1.1, for example. Ethernet address, ETH_adder. Ethernet address is the MAC address of the Ethernet interface that's in the computer. So we often see those MACs. In fact, I think the examples, for instance, show both an IP_adder and an if_adder, or an inet_adder and an if_adder. The IP address and the MAC address right here. But the one that was throwing him a bit, and in fact, it would throw me if I just saw it, if_adder, interface address. What in the world is the interface address? It's not IPv4. It's none of those pieces. So on your Windows machine, there are a few ways to do this. If you do a route print, a lot of stuff goes by. All your routes go by. But if you scroll all the way back up to the beginning of the route print, it tells you, I'm going to give you a list of all your IPv4 routes and all your IPv6 routes. But before I do that, let me show you all of the interfaces on your machine. The interface list, interface 10, is this MAC address, which is my Intel Pro 1000 MT desktop adapter. I have an interface 1, which is my Loopback. I have an interface 11, which is an ISATAP adapter, and an interface 12, which is a Teredo adapter, Teredo interface. Usually the 11 and 12, 11 used for the VPN type connectivity, 12 used for the IPv6 tunneling. So usually it's 10 and 1 we're going to see for these interfaces. So when we're doing an ARP, ARP-A is a good example of this, where I'd see my inet addresses, my MAC addresses, that's where I'd see those. Or if you were using the ARP commands that require an if address, where you're doing a -n and then you have to do an if address, I know that 10 is my interface. So if I do an ARP-N 10, that work? Did I do the wrong thing? I did the wrong thing. Or did I not? Did I do a -n? I guess I didn't. So it displays the ARP for the network interface by the if_adder. So in mine, did I have an interface 10? I think I did. Yeah, it's my Intel. I'll know why I didn't do that. That's live television right there. We'll have to do it. Oh, I need it in conjunction with something else is what that is. The interface, though, is kind of hard to find. Why would I have to do a route to get to the interface? That doesn't even make sense to get to that place. There is a net show command, NSH, netshell, interface, IP show interface, netsh, interface, IP show interfaces, I think is what it is. Is that it? Yeah. So that shows me my index 1 is my loopback and index 10 is my local area connection. So there's a good example of using those, or at least having some commands you can remember. I do route print because it's quick. I can never remember netsh interface, IP show interfaces. You know, that netshell view is difficult to find sometimes. So that's difficult enough to remember. Route print I use all the time anyway. So that's a good one to remember when I'm looking for interfaces. There's also some you can do there as well. Some very good ones you can go through, to very good commands to go through those pieces. So let's pop to the phones then and see what might be going on there. The 856 area code. Are you there, caller?
Yes. How you doing, Professor Mercer? First-time caller. How are you?
Hey,
Gene
thanks
Stevens.
for calling. Hi, what's your name?
Gene.
Hey, Gene.
Stevens.
Thanks for calling.
Yes.
What can we do for you today?
Oh, you're welcome. Professor Mercer, I'm currently studying for my A+. I know this is a Net Plus program.
That's okay.
But I'm curious, once I finish my A+ and receive my certification, I know there's some that says to go after the N+, and there's others say CCNA.
Sure.
So I'm not sure which one should I try to attain next. The second question is, if you already answered some of the questions, do you have a place on your website that one could go to look for your answers, or do you have to play the whole entire video?
Now, I'm going to answer your second question first because it's something I've been going back and forth with, because we kind of break these questions up into very specific blocks during the study group, and I go through learn about a multimeter. Here's how you would use ARP or not use ARP. In my particular case, here's how you would go through and which category cable you would use. And it certainly lends itself to separate blocks that I could configure. And there was a study group or two where I was breaking it up into smaller pieces. And I got to admit, it was actually a great idea, because now I do Google searches, and the exact Google search that answers the exact question I was asking is right there. And it was so easy. I can go to the video, just look at what was answered during that piece. And I think I may go back to doing that. I think there's a little bit more editing that has to be done on my side, but it's not that much. We're not talking about, changing the world with editing or taking an entire day. I think it would be a really good way to do it, and I feel like I'm missing an opportunity by not doing it. So now your berating of my editing is now making me feel guilty, and now I'm gonna be in the back of my head. Gene said I should really do this, so now I feel like I really should be doing it. It's come up before, and I think I just need people like you to keep telling me it would be a really good idea, and I think I might go with that. So let's now talk about, what do I do after my A+? Because I think you're right. I think there is a divide in the paths where you can go with networking, primarily because Cisco has designed it to work this way. So first, there was the Network Plus certification. It does go through a huge number of network fundamentals. I think it's an exceptional certification to have. I think regardless of what direction you go in technology, that you need to have an understanding of these network principles, whether it's through Network Plus or something like, I'm going to compare it to the CCENT, which is the Cisco sort of version of the Network Plus. It's actually a little bit different. We're going to talk about this. You would even mention the CCNA, and there are actually a number of different CCNA exams. The one that most people are referring to is the CCNA routing and switching. Some people see that referred to as the CCNA RNS for short. There's also a CCNA security. There's other CCNA things that you can get. But I think most people think that instead of Network Plus, they'll get the CCNA. Network Plus probably best compares to the CCENT exam from Cisco. So let's take another step back. To get a CCNA from Cisco, which in itself is a great certification, it's very Cisco-centric. But if you're looking for a job where you're doing a lot of Cisco network administration, that's what the CCNA is, that would be a fine certification to have. It really consists of two different parts. The part that is most similar to the Network Plus is the CCENT. And it is sort of like a Network Plus and then some more stuff. It certainly, I think, covers the bulk of what Network Plus covers, but it also requires that you understand how to work on a Cisco switch, how to configure Cisco routing functions. I think in that command, is OSPF in that command? There's a number of routing protocols and things you have to understand, and troubleshooting of those that you have to understand for the CCENT. The CCENT used to be like dollar for dollar exactly the same as the Network Plus by design. I think Cisco wanted some of that Network Plus money, and they were trying to get people to take their exams rather than the CompTIA exam. But what they've done most recently is they've changed the formatting of them so that the CCENT includes a lot more Cisco hands-on and a lot more troubleshooting, a lot more networking knowledge of things you need to know. There is a second exam you can then take after that would get you the CCNA routing and switching. So those two exams together do that piece. There, you could also, if you were really knowledgeable, you had already taken your Network Plus certification and you knew those already, you could take one exam that was a sort of a combo of both of those, and the one big exam would give you the CCNA routing and switching. So from a Cisco's perspective, they give you the choice. You can take one big exam, you could take two, I wouldn't say they were smaller exams, but two exams which have less content that you would need to know on them. OSPF is in there. Thank you, chat room. So there's the choice you have to make. There are a number of people, though, they're not going into the Cisco world. They really don't have an interest in Cisco, or they really feel like configuring Cisco devices and understanding OSPF and how it operates, and understanding, I think there's some spanning tree also on the exam. You know, those types of things they would rather not have to go through the process of learning, because they're just trying to get a position in a help desk, and the help desk is just looking for a Network Plus. And they think the Network Plus, it's a smaller exam, at least from a topic perspective. There's fewer things that I have to know to get that. Other folks say, I really have a direction. I really want to do more with Cisco. I'm very attracted to the networking side of things. I want to do more with security in the future, so I'm going to need to know a lot more networking. So it just makes sense for somebody doing that. Maybe they would skip the Network Plus and go straight to the CCENT and the CCNA routing and switching exam. Kind of makes sense for doing that piece.
Yeah.
And ultimately, ask, when you're taking these exams, you're getting these certifications, you're doing it for some type of reason. So I would imagine the person who's looking at your resume or wanting this certification from you probably has in their mind what they would rather want to see as well. So you almost have to temper it with what other people might want, and sort of maybe I'll go get the Cisco because that's what they want, or they specifically list in the job description that you need a Network Plus certification because they might not even have Cisco equipment at their facility, which is rare, but it does happen. So that at least tells you sort of a mindset from my perspective. I think both of them are good certifications. I think there's certainly a place in IT for both of those. I guess it just depends on what other people are wanting from you and what you're wanting to do with it yourself.
I appreciate that. The final question, one of the things that came to me when you were sharing, if you took the one that was combined, how long is that particular type of exam? Is it based on the same as like the A plus 90 minutes, or is it happen to be a 3-hour type exam? I
don't think it'd be 3 hours because I would fall over at that point if that exam. The two exams, the 100-101 is the one for CCNA. They call this the Interconnecting Cisco Networking Devices Part 1, or it's abbreviated to the ICND1. And then, of course, that's a two-part exam. You take the other exam, the ICND2, for the Part 2. The one that is the big exam is for Interconnecting Cisco Networking Devices Accelerated, CCNAX. That is the recommended training you would get. That's sort of the name of it. The exam is the 200-120 CCNA. It's only 90 minutes. It's only 50 to 60 questions. So it's not this big monster exam. It's a tough exam, though. Cisco does a lot of simulations. And I'm not talking performance-based questions. I mean, they show you a map, and they say, here is a map, and OSPF isn't working between these three sites. And it allows you to click on the sites, and it pops open a console window to the router, and you can run commands in each one of those routers. You've got 3 windows up on the screen for each router, and you run the commands, and you look at the OSPF configurations, and then it asks you a series of questions. On this router, what problem are you seeing here? If you wanted to correct this, what would you type in to this router? They really go through quite a bit. Or they'll say, type in the command that would enable OSPF on this particular device, and you have to type it in at the command line. It is an intense exam along those lines. You really have to know your stuff at the command line, but it's not an enormous exam. I've had to sit for, I took a beta exam recently from a manufacturer where whenever they do this, by the way, you should absolutely take advantage of this. Occasionally the manufacturer will say, you can go take our beta exam for free. And they give you every possible question on the exam. They just go through the entire question pool. And I sat there for 4 hours. I used every minute of 4 hours and took that exam. I don't recommend that very often. But one of the things they do is they give it to you for free, and they say if you pass it, you got the certification. So I did, and I got the certification. So I guess it was 4 hours well spent. I came out of the testing center, and I had like 20 messages on my phone. My wife saying, "What happened to you? I thought you were going to take a test. You were gone half the day." Yeah, I know. Sorry, dear. I should have warned you. It was a beta exam. So that's extreme for those cases. But fortunately for the CCNA, no, I think the CCNA, and I think both the other exams are 90 minutes as well. Let me check real quick. 90 minutes for the part 1, 40 to 50 questions. And for the part 2, 75 minutes, even less for the part 2, 50 to 60 questions. So, none of those too crazy, I don't think.
Well, I appreciate you, Professor Mercer. I found you online after I took my A+ test originally and failed.
Oh.
And I'm doing much better with the Gleam Stream CompTIA A+ book.
Oh, good.
I used another book prior, and with the integrated learning, it's so helpful.
Fantastic.
So I'm looking to do the test again at the end of August, and I took the first test, both of them together, the 801,
right.
The 801 and
wow.
the 802.
Okay.
Which is a no-no.
That's a lot.
Yes, which is a no-no. I wasn't really prepared, but now that I know, and plus with all your information, I'm looking forward to the end of August, and I will call you back and let you know that I did pass.
I'd love to hear about that. And I wish you all the luck. If there's any questions that come up in the meantime, we're all here to help you. Just let us know what you need.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks for calling.
Thanks again for the learning lab, too, because I'm looking to get that as well.
My pleasure.
To increase my chances.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Professor Mercer.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
There's a good point Gene made. Whenever I took my first A+ exam, this is a long time ago. I took the A+ exam back when I was a young man. I took that very first A+. I think I took the 600 series was my first, and I was studying up. This was before I had videos. I didn't make the videos yet. In fact, I took the exam and sort of made the videos as I was finishing up and after I took the exam. So I made my 600 series videos. I was planning to take the exam prior to doing that. And I was reading a book. I got all the way through the book. And I thought, man, that was a tough book to get through. That book was really not for me. And I grabbed the next, I had 3 books. I grabbed the next book and I started reading that one. I thought, this book is great. Why didn't I start with this one? It's remarkable how much a difference a book will make. And so if you're reading through a book, you're like, this book is not working for me, go grab one of the other popular ones. Go to Amazon, do a search for all of the Amazon books. You can read the reviews and see what people like. It really made a big difference for me. So don't discount that. Having the right study materials are important. Get a good book, watch the videos. There's a number of books out there that are nothing but questions and answers. I think those are good tests for yourself to run through. And if you do well with those, you would be ready to take your exam with those pieces as well. Okay, how are we on time? I did a full screen on my virtual machine here. Now I can't see what time it is. Okay, approaching an hour and 40 minutes. The chat, the lines are open on the website if anybody would like to call in. I had a number of questions come through this month, though. Let me pop open my spreadsheet. I just did not have time to get through, but I did flag them. So we can quickly run through those pieces. Where would it be? What did I call it? What was the name? I found it. Okay. There was one of the questions was about the new Network Plus test. I think I talked a little bit about that earlier at the very beginning of the study group. That I really expect they're going to be bringing out a new Network Plus test end of the year. So we got plenty of time. If you're studying now, you're in great shape. There's nothing you need to worry about along those lines. We didn't do OSI model this month. I got a lot of OSI questions this month. I think there may be an increase in the amount of interest in OSI. So maybe we'll really step through OSI next month and I'll really break it down for you. I've got some new pieces I think I'd like to add to that. And those pieces in there. There were a number of subnetting questions I got as well, but I don't tend to do a lot of subnetting on the live stream, and maybe I should. Maybe I should just do one live stream that's nothing but subnetting, because I get so many subnetting questions. But it's kind of hard to spend a lot of time on that when I know it's such a small part of the exam. It's one of these things that it's so difficult to grasp the first time that it takes a lot of time to get. And once you kind of get it, you're good to go. You got everything you need. And I've got a method that I use when I walk in the exam, and certain things that I write down that I can answer any subnetting question in about 10 seconds by not even doing a calculation, just by looking at what I've written down in this matrix of numbers that I've got. And I really should share that, because it's valuable. It doesn't actually it sort of teaches you subnetting. It really helps if you know subnetting prior to doing that. But I just can't trust myself on an exam to do it in my head, so I write everything down and get it ready to go. I just hate spending so much time on subnetting, because I feel that it takes away or it is it really discounts the value of all of the other information on the exam. There's a lot more information on the exam that you have to know about that you should be spending a lot less time on, instead of wasting all your time with subnetting. It's not a waste at all. You need to know subnetting. Just for this exam, it's such a tiny little piece that if you just focus on the classes, the CIDR block, you understand some binary to decimal, I think you'll do fine. But you still might get a couple of questions. So that's kind of what I go back and forth on anyway. So you can tell me if I'm off the mark there. I'm open for suggestions. I'm not so big that I'm not interested in knowing. I think that would be valuable to have. We didn't do any IPv6. I think last month I might have done some IPv6. This is the first month of the Network Plus that I think I'm doing the quiz at the very beginning, which is a lot of fun. So I think we're going to stick with that for those of you sending in those questions. For those of you that are asking, what kind of performance-based questions can we expect to see on the exam? I don't know. Well, one, if I did know, I couldn't tell you, because everybody who takes the exam signs a non-disclosure agreement restricting you from telling anybody what was on the exam. But I can tell you that the questions themselves, and I think we mentioned this earlier, they could be matching. They could be put things in a certain order. They could be here's a picture of something. What is that? Or they could be simulation, where you're plopped at a command line, and it's up to you now to type in the right commands to perform a particular function. So they're all over the place. But you can sort of think yourself what you might get. If you look at my video on trace route, I take you through a trace route, and we look at the different steps of a trace route. If you can do that, you're probably ready for the performance-based part of an exam that would ask you anything about trace route. So that's a good example. It may not even require additional work on your side other than going through a few labs and understanding that piece. I like having a lot of things in my lab and testing and running it through. I want to understand things at a protocol level, so I'm always capturing packets. I'm looking at the decodes. That's sort of where I cut my teeth in networking, was with protocol analyzers. So I'm always wanting to know what's happening over the wire. If you can read a protocol analyzer, you'll know everything you would ever need to know about anything going across the network. You can answer any question about performance. You can answer any question about throughput. You can answer any question about what's happening on the network. It's not a mystery. So very valuable to know that. Get Laura Chappell's book on Wireshark and read through that. She just released a new one about less than a year ago, I think. And the perfect person to learn Wireshark from. Good example there. We also talked about, well, let me check, don't want to leave anybody on hold. So let's very quickly, before I go through any more of those, let's go back to the phones, to the 661 area code. Are there, caller?
Good morning. How you doing, Professor?
Hi, who's on the phone?
Anthony.
Hello, Anthony. I thought it was, or was he typing your name before you even said it? How are you, sir?
How are you doing this morning?
Doing good.
Oh, I'm fine.
What can we do for you today?
I finally resolved my problem with my computer crashing.
All right, this was a problem, by the way, that has been going on for how many months, Anthony?
It's gone about 2-3 months.
Okay. It's been a sort of a saga. We've all been tuning in for the latest episode of Anthony's Machine, and we've gone from taking and doing migrations of the user information with the easy migration. We've talked about taking the hard drive out and putting in an external hard drive case. There was the talk last time, I think, of sticking the Windows media in and doing another installation on top of the existing Windows, kind of a recovery installation. So where are we now? What it sounds like we've got some interesting developments in the story.
Well, like you say, when something breaks and you try to fix it, that's where you learn.
So true.
I had purchased a recovery disk, and the recovery disk didn't do exactly what it was supposed to do.
Uh-oh. What did it do?
I sent that back. I got that through Amazon.
Okay.
And what I finally finished doing was put it in the dock station dock and just put it, connected it to another computer and transferred the files, drop and paste, and then put the system back in the hard drive and put the information back in the computer.
You had mentioned, obviously that's one that you're not able to transfer over applications, obviously, but at least you had your data that you could then install apps over. So you went to Amazon, and I'm guessing you got one of these, Windows 7 64-bit recovery boot disk CD all version kind of things. Am I looking at the right things?
Yes, it was a Windows XP Vista 7 recovery disk.
It's like $10, $18, something like that.
$19,
okay.
Something like that.
Got
and it doesn't work because it's supposed to take you to the command line, and once I got to the command line, I'm trying to enter the information.
Right.
And I don't recognize that.
What these are, for those of you wondering, because we were talking about doing an OS recovery where you're installing Windows back over a system, and in fact, many manufacturers call the Windows install disk the recovery disk, which only complicates things. And occasionally, if you get a brand new machine, well, not occasionally, when you get a brand new machine, they never include operating system disks with your new machine. But usually there is a command you can run or a program you can run from your desktop that will burn a set of what they call recovery disks, which is really the Windows installation media. And if you're going to be reinstalling Windows, you need the Windows reinstallation media. Well, these disks they have on Amazon and in fact, they even say this is not a Windows reinstall disk. This is a disk to help fix the boot process. This is a Windows PE disk, a pre-installation environment disk that is designed to do exactly what you said it did. It went to the command prompt, but then it's up to you to know what to type. It doesn't do any recovery on its own. There's no button you can push to say, fix my machine, and off it goes. It just gives you enough to get to the command prompt, and at that point, it's up to you to figure out the rest.
And what was so strange about it is that I'm entering the command, that I'm supposed to enter, and I don't recognize that command. That command is not in this disk, or it just didn't understand or didn't know what to do.
This is one of those challenges that it really is up to you if you get a recovery disk, like a PE disk. A good example is the BART PE. If you just do a Google search for BART, B-A-R-T, the BART pre-installed environment is a good example of this. You can download and burn to your own, and it boots up a Windows, and there's a lot of programs inside of it that you could run once you get to the command prompt, and it even brings up to some degree a somewhat usable Windows interface. But you're right, it's up to you at that point to know what to do, and who knows what they built here, because you can build your own Windows PE disks if you're an administrator. In my Windows 7 course, I go through the process of building your own recovery or your own Windows PE and how to put your own applications on it. But who knows what they put on these on Amazon? It's actually a pretty smart, enterprising person that has decided, well, I'm just going to burn some and sell them on Amazon. That's exactly what they've done. When you buy it, it's not part of the Amazon Prime. When you buy it, it ships directly from the manufacturer of these CDs or the DVDs. And they're not a Windows product at all. There's a third party created them, and hopefully they've included the programs you need to be able to run what you need to run, but there's no guarantee because it's not a Windows product.
Yes,
or a Microsoft product.
I don't recommend them at all.
Yeah. So ultimately, though, you got your data. I think we talked about that early on, that At least your data was
Yeah,
safe.
I got my data out and my pictures and everything, so I'm good to go with that. I've got a couple of books that I had translated from Spanish to English.
Wow.
So I got all that information back.
You're sort of going all the way around the barn, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It took me a minute to figure it out so I didn't lose anything, because the problem was sometimes when you transfer information from one hard drive to another, I found that the information might come with the folder, but the folder is missing something, and the computer cannot find it.
Right. That's right. Are you fluent in Spanish?
Very.
Okay, so at least you had that going for you. So, but it was just a matter of getting the right information. I think early on we said, well, at least you got the data. It's on the disk. It's on the hard drive. At least you could pull it out and stick it on another drive and go the direction that you ended up going. I think it's a good example, though, that if somebody gets a brand new machine, they're talking about this in the chat room right now. What? They don't even send an installation CD? Nope. They do not send the DVDs with the Windows installation media on any new computers at all. You're not going to find them. They're usually stored in a separate partition. They're sometimes stored in a separate partition. There is sometimes a utility you can run that will burn them so you can have a physical copy, and you should always have a physical copy of that installation disc, if only because of listening to Anthony's saga and having that available there. That would have helped you, I think.
Yes, they used to send you the operation system where you could just reload it. The last computer I purchased was through Gateway, and they did send me the disc.
Yeah, I remember those days.
And that's been quite a while.
It has been quite a while. They used to be really good about sending those things out, but now the competition got more, the margins got lower, and they just stopped doing that completely. You can't even find one these days that has that in there anywhere. It's just not available.
No. Now, my question was, I purchased that exam cram book, the 801 and 802 by David L. Prowse.
Yes.
And that comes with a CD.
Okay.
Now, in my other machine, it was no problem. It ran very well. Now, once I reinstalled this operating system and I tried to download the CD into the computer again to get it to function like it was before, I can't get in there.
Really?
It's like it's just locked me out. I've tried to put in passwords and everything else trying to get the exam back on my computer, and it's not doing it.
The program itself is not running, or the CD is not working at all?
It connects to Pearson.
Oh.
Okay,
and then something.
Once it connects to Pearson, they want you to buy something, and before, it was no problem. It was free.
Yeah, I wonder what's up with that. That's a and here one of the challenges is with this is that the company that makes the software is often different than the publisher, and certainly different than the author, and usually these things have a very convoluted process to be able to get support. But I think your only option there is to go back to the publisher of the book and say, my CD's not working, what can I do? There was also, I will say that I've sent emails back and forth to that particular author. We've communicated in the past, and I think he's run into this problem himself, because he has put the questions from that DVD, that CD program, into a separate file you can download from the internet, but he only makes it available for people who have his book. So in this case, you may want to email him directly and say, the CD isn't working any longer. I understand you got these questions available on the internet. Can you give me the link to those? And I bet you he will respond to that. He's very active on LinkedIn, and I'm sure he'll respond to private emails as well.
Okay.
So I suspect he's aware of this challenge. Yeah.
Well, anybody who's out there, listening, they need to make sure that they back up all their stuff. Because when you get that problem of a blue screen and things just go haywire and you're trying to figure out how to resolve it, and I went from 3 months of trying to resolve the problem, and finally had to put it on the docking station and just transfer information. I was trying to keep it the way it was on the hard drive so I wouldn't lose anything on the applications, but that wasn't possible.
And I agree. And it doesn't matter how you back up, just back up in some way. Get it on, do an off-site backup, do an on-site backup, have the data at least one other place. Ideally, you'd have 2 copies somewhere else. In our studio, everything that I do, for instance, we're doing a stream, is captured on my video switching device that you're watching all this through. A copy of that is then sent to my network address storage. I have on my network address storage externally connected disks, USB connected disks, and eSATA disk connected to that back up to that every night. So I have another offline version of it. So I'm creating extra copies all the time. You imagine if I sat here and did an entire video course and then I lost all the video? That would not be good. So I have,
not at all.
I do a lot of backups. We should all do more backups. And I'm always trying to find new ways to get that done.
Well, I kept the information on the other hard drive, and then I have an external hard drive.
90 seconds.
Also, so that won't happen again.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, thanks, Anthony, for calling in. Thanks for the end of the story. Now we'll have to think of something else to do.
Yeah, well, that's like you say, when it breaks, that's where you learn how to use it.
We'll come up with something. We'll break something here. I'm sure we will. Thanks for calling.
You have a good weekend.
Thank you
for your information.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. You probably heard the little lady saying there were 90 seconds left. She'll keep counting down.
Seconds.
So you have 60 seconds to call in, but we do have someone who did call in. As long as you call in before it runs out of time, you'll be in good shape. And we have the 202 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Oh, it's very quiet, caller. Are you there, 202 area code? It's just a hiss. Just a hiss. No noise there at all. One of the challenges with calling in on Skype is the whole Skype microphone thing. So if you are calling in on Skype, well, you won't have time. But for next time when you call in on Skype, you can always run the Skype test prior to calling anywhere where you talk into your microphone and you hear back what the nice Skype lady heard. And that way you can be assured that you're there. I'll give you another chance, caller. Are you there, 202?
10 seconds.
Nope, just the nice lady telling me that I have 10 seconds left on my call-ins for today. Well, I'm sorry that one didn't work out, but you're more than welcome. Send me a message directly. You can call in to me directly at any time on my contact page. In fact, on the Professor Messer website, at the very top of the page is a Contact Us link. Here we are. That's not the page at all, is it? This is the page. And right at the top is a Contact Us right above the Professor Messer logo. And if you do that, it'll take you to another page where you can contact us. You can even call me. There's a link here that will call me and connect you. It'll call you as well. So it'll connect us at the same time. It's difficult to catch me, though. Most often we'll take it to my voicemail. But I listen to all my voicemails. I read all of my emails. I try to respond to all of my emails and all of my voicemails. And that's also a challenge as well to make that happen all the time. So I apologize if I didn't give you a direct connection, but I try to go through them every night and at least give you some type of response if it's something you're looking for. And I can point you in a direction or give you a link or at least give you my opinion of some of those things. Well, that certainly brings us to the end of a full 2 hours. We had our study group today. We had our study group after show today. We got through quite a bit of content. Hopefully you liked it too. I'd love to get your feedback on the new format of going through questions for the first hour and taking calls in the second. If there's other questions you have about the Network Plus or things you'd like to know, you can, of course, always give me a call anytime and ask me questions for those pieces. So from here, our headquarters here in Tallahassee, Florida at Messer Studios, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Take care, everyone.